Since its first release in the 80s, Tetris has inspired a lot of games. Some cloned it, some took the stacking approach and made it their own. Recently, I've been on the hunt for modern indie block stacking game to review and spread the word about. If you haven't already watched part 1 of this series on Tetris-like games, I put a link in the description below. And without further ado, let's dive into 6 more games that I found and played in the past year. If you've seen my review of Centrist in part 1, you'll know the concept. Mind-bending 4-directional drops stacking around a central point. Midtris improves that with some welcome upgrades. The UI is slightly cleaner, and you now get a longer preview queue for upcoming pieces. More importantly, it adds modern Tetris features like the super rotation system and the ability to hold a piece. Those changes alone make the gameplay feel a lot smoother and more flexible. There are also new modes like Midtris and Pentris, updated scoring that rewards combos more, and a new soundtrack to keep things fresh. At the end of the day, Midtris is basically a polished version of Centrist that looks almost the same but plays better. I'd still give it the same grade, an A. Next up is Reaktor, another twist on the block puzzle formula. Similar to Midtris, you're stacking towards the middle, but here, it's the board that rotates and not the gravity. That alone gives it a very different rhythm and makes it a bit less mind-bending. The game also has multiplayer, which I was told was the most fun way to play it. And there's a unique mechanic called the X-ray drop. Once you charge the gauge by clearing layers normally, you can unleash it for huge combos, which generally is the point of the game and what will make you clear levels. At first, I thought there was no next piece preview, but it turns out it's hidden up at the top of the board as part of the contour. Not exactly intuitive if you're used to Tetris, but it sort of works once you notice it. Single player is structured as a series of challenges that get progressively harder, and of course there's an online leaderboard where some of the high scores are absolutely ridiculous. The music is pretty good, kind of a chill lo-fi synth vibe that fits the atmosphere perfectly. Overall, I think Reaktor is a solid game. The limited number of modes and the lack of friends to play multiplayer with do hold it back a little for me, and one of the achievements seemed bugged when I cleared level 8, but despite that, I had fun pushing through the challenges, and I think it's a neat game that deserves recognition. Reaktor earns an A. Tetrachroma takes the classic block stacking formula and adds a color mechanic that's cleverly implemented. The mechanic works kind of like Othello, flipping colors all the way to the edge as you place pieces, and it completely changes how you approach the game compared to standard Tetris. The presentation is solid, pixel art graphics with a 90s retro vibe, but the way the pieces move and the little bounce of the matrix feels a tad more modern. The soundtrack is pretty decent too, there's some catchy tunes in there. As for the gameplay, there's a variety of modes. The classic and arcade modes are probably the toughest with that color mechanic getting in the way. When playing these in Marathon, which is 400 lines, the first 100 are quite tricky, but the last 50 lines crank up the challenge with high gravity, and I'll be honest, after more than 10 hours of playtime, I still haven't managed to clear the arcade marathon. The Steam achievements are also quite challenging to complete, and I'm still working on that too. But there are some easier modes too, like Wild Mode, Big Mode, and Cell Mode, which either give you chromatic pieces that can be cleared with any color, or just a different board size that also changes the gameplay. Altogether, Tetrachroma feels like one of those great indie finds, a fresh twist on a classic formula that stands apart from the usual clones. For me, this one earns an A. Block Connector looks like it could be fun, but it really isn't. The tutorial barely explains the mechanics, and the whole thing just feels awkward. As you play, you eventually figure out that green blocks heal you, and the other 3 colors attack the enemy, or at least I think so. But I'm not even sure if there's any kind of weakness system. It honestly doesn't seem to matter much how you stack. There's this connector count on the left, which I assume means the higher the number, the bigger the attack. Hopefully it scales exponentially because your attack only fires when the stack reaches the very top of the board. That makes the stacking feel secondary, random, and unsatisfying. Then you get to the bosses, and this is where it really falls apart. All of them look exactly the same, just reskinned with a new color and bigger health bar. After the first stage, you're stuck in a repetitive boss rush where each one hits harder and takes longer to beat than the last. The first time I played, There were only 3 bosses, and that was the end. Later, I managed to get to stage 5 somehow, but it was still the same exact thing. No variety, no surprise, just more of the same stretched out longer. And the worst part, when you finally run out of HP, the game literally thanks you for playing and then shuts down completely. I've never seen that before. No retry option, no continue, not even a main menu. It feels unfinished, like the devs didn't bother to add the basics. Visually, the game does have some kind of glowy style that looks neat at first, but it's really just a flashy cover for something extremely bare bones. And the music, it's okay, but very basic, and it loops so quickly that it becomes repetitive pretty fast. In the end, Block Connector could have been an interesting spin on the formula, but everything from the mechanics to the boss design screams lazy, unfinished demo to me. I'm giving it an F. Now, here's an example of how you do it. Mixolumia takes a similar stacking approach but executes it much better. The pixel art style is clean, the visual effects pop without being distracting, and the whole presentation feels cohesive. There is also a full color customization available for the blocks, which I find neat, if only to accommodate for various kinds of color blindness. Another highlight is also the music. The soundtrack evolves as you progress through a mode, generally increasing in complexity and intensity. There's a choice of 5 tracks or no music if that's your preference. As for the gameplay, it's smooth and addictive. Some of the combos that can trigger when the board gets more filled are really satisfying, and they can boost your score by a lot. But don't expect to breeze through the game. Some of the challenges get very tough, and the online leaderboards are stacked with ridiculously high scores. Beating your own best run is fun, but chasing the community adds an extra layer of challenge. The Steam achievements are also not quite a walk in the park. Altogether, Mixolumia is stylish, tough, and rewarding. Out of all the modern Tetris-likes, this one stands out as something special to me. Mixolumia gets an S. Finally, we have InfidHells. This one is a free-to-play game you can find on itch.io, which means you can pay what you want for it. The game has a very dark atmosphere, built almost entirely in monochrome red pixel art, which makes a strong first impression. Right away, you'll notice the vertical aspect ratio, which hints at its Android roots, but it's also available on Windows and plays really smoothly with a controller. At its heart, it's still Tetris, but with a roguelite twist. Each run is spiced up with passive and active bonuses that change your approach to stacking to maximize attack. On top of that, there's a surprisingly large variety of enemies that disrupt the board in different ways, making each playthrough feel different. There are 12 characters to choose from, each with their own ability, which also adds a lot of replay value. And as you keep playing, you can unlock skins for each of them. Progression doesn't stop there either. There's a full skill tree where you can spend resources collecting during runs to unlock permanent upgrades. This one even has a story and lore. Between levels, you'll see short dialogues tying into the premise of climbing out of hell towards heaven while taking down opponents along the way. It's a cool little narrative hook that complements the gameplay well. Altogether, InfidHells feels original, ambitious, and packed with content, especially for a free indie game. Because of its atmosphere, depth, and replay value, I'm giving it an A. And that's already it for part 2. Are you going to try some of these games, or do you know other games like Tetris that I haven't covered yet? Let me know in the comments, and I shall see you in part 3.